The dust had barely settled on her husband's grave when Florence Nakamura discovered the bank had taken everything she owned. And now she knelt in the small wooden chapel at the edge of Sloan, Nevada, her voice hoarse from crying out to a God who seemed to have abandoned her in the scorching summer of 1882. Isaac Irvington had ridden into town that morning with nothing but his horse, his rifle, and a reputation for being faster with a gun than most men were with their words. He had not planned to stop in Sloan for more than a night, maybe two if the saloon was friendly and the gambling tables fair. The town was little more than a waypoint between the silver mines and the railroad, a collection of sun-bleached buildings huddled together against the vast Nevada desert that stretched endlessly in all directions. But something made him pause as he passed the small chapel, a sound so broken and raw that it cut through the afternoon heat like a knife through butter. He tied his horse to the post outside and removed his hat before pushing open the wooden door. The interior was cool and dim, a relief from the relentless sun that had beaten down on him for the past 3 days of riding. At first, he thought the chapel was empty, but then he saw her kneeling at the front, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. Florence did not hear him approach. She was lost in her grief, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins and hung around her face in tangled waves. Her dress, once fine, was dusty and worn at the edges. She looked like a woman who had been fighting a losing battle for far too long. "Madam," Isaac said softly, not wanting to startle her. She gasped and turned, her tear-stained face registering shock and then embarrassment. She tried to stand, but her legs seemed to give out and she caught herself against the pew. Isaac moved forward instinctively, reaching out to steady her, but she pulled back. "I am sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I did not know anyone was here." "No need to apologize," Isaac replied. He kept his distance, sensing her discomfort. "I heard you from outside. Are you all right?" The question was absurd and they both knew it. She was clearly not all right. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks and she wiped at them angrily with the back of her hand. "I have nothing left," she whispered, the words tumbling out as if she could not hold them back any longer. "My husband died 3 weeks ago. Fever took him in 4 days. The bank seized our property yesterday because we had debts I did not know existed. They took the house, the land, everything we worked for. I have been sleeping in the back of the general store because the owner knew my husband, but he said he cannot keep me there much longer. I have no family, no money, nowhere to go. I have nothing left." Isaac looked at her for a long moment. He had seen desperation before, had felt it himself more times than he cared to count. But there was something about this woman, something in the way she held herself despite her obvious pain, that moved him in a way he had not expected. "You have me," he said. Florence stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "What? You have me," Isaac repeated. "I know we are strangers, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I cannot just walk away from this. From you. Let me help you." "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice full of suspicion and confusion. "You do not even know me." "Maybe that is exactly why," Isaac said. "I do not have any reason not to help you. I have been drifting for years, going from one town to the next, never staying anywhere long enough to matter. Maybe it is time I stopped running and actually did something worthwhile." Florence shook her head slowly. "I cannot accept charity from a stranger." "It is not charity," Isaac said firmly. "It is an offer. You need help and I am offering it. No strings attached. I will help you get back on your feet, help you figure out what comes next. After that, if you want me gone, I will be gone." She studied his face, searching for some hint of deception or ulterior motive. But all she saw was sincerity in his gray eyes and something else she could not quite name. Exhaustion finally won over suspicion. "I do not even know your name," she said quietly. "Isaac Irvington. Most people just call me Isaac." "Florence Nakamura," she replied. "My husband was Japanese. His family came here 20 years ago." Isaac nodded. He had traveled enough to know that the world was full of people from everywhere, and he had never seen the point in treating anyone differently because of where they came from. "Well, Florence Nakamura, first thing we need to do is get you a proper meal and a real place to sleep. Then we can figure out the rest." "I told you, I have no money," Florence said, a hint of defiance creeping into her voice despite her desperate circumstances. "I have enough for both of us for a while," Isaac said. "I won a decent amount in Carson City last week. Poker." He saw her expression change slightly. "I am not a gambler by trade," he added quickly. "I just happen to be good at reading people." Florence hesitated for another moment, then slowly nodded. "All right, but I will pay you back every cent. I do not know how yet, but I will." "We can worry about that later," Isaac said. He offered her his arm, and after a brief pause, she took it. They walked out of the chapel together into the blazing Nevada afternoon. The sun was merciless, turning everything it touched into shades of gold and copper. Isaac led her to the small boarding house at the center of town, a two-story building with a faded sign that read, "Mrs. Patterson's Rooms." The woman who ran the establishment was a widow herself, a stern-faced woman in her 50s who had seen enough of life to be suspicious of everyone. But Isaac had a way of talking that could charm even the most hardened souls, and within 10 minutes, he had secured a room for Florence for the next 2 weeks. "You will be sharing the washroom with the other ladies on this floor," Mrs. Patterson explained as she led them up the narrow staircase. "Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6. If you are late, you do not eat. No men allowed in the rooms, no exceptions." She gave Isaac a pointed look at that last rule, and he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Understood, madam. I will be getting my own room down the street." Mrs. Patterson sniffed, but seemed satisfied. She unlocked a door and pushed it open to reveal a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out onto the street below. "It is not much, but it is clean and safe," Mrs. Patterson said. "It is perfect," Florence said softly. "Thank you." After Mrs. Patterson left, Florence sat down on the edge of the bed and looked up at Isaac, who remained in the doorway. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "Nobody is this kind to a stranger without a reason." Isaac leaned against the doorframe and considered the question. "My mother died when I was 12, he said finally. "My father drank himself to death 2 years later. I had an older sister who tried to take care of me, but she was only 16 herself. One winter, we ran out of food and money. She was too proud to ask for help, and I was too young to know how bad things really were. A man came to our door one day. He was a rancher from the next county over. He had heard somehow that we were struggling. He brought us food, helped my sister find work at a nearby farm, made sure we had what we needed to get through that winter. When my sister asked him why he was helping us, you know what he said?" Florence shook her head. "He said that his wife had told him once that the measure of a man is not in what he keeps for himself, but in what he gives away when it costs him something. He had lost his wife the year before, and helping people was his way of honoring her memory." Isaac paused. "That man saved our lives. I have never forgotten it. So maybe I am doing this because someone did it for me once, and I figure it is my turn to pass it along." Florence felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were different from the tears she had shed in the chapel. These came from a place of unexpected gratitude and the faint stirring of something that might have been hope. "Thank you," she whispered. Isaac nodded. "Get some rest. I will come by tomorrow morning and we can talk about what happens next." He left, closing the door gently behind him. Florence lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, she fell asleep without crying. True to his word, Isaac returned the next morning after breakfast. He found Florence looking slightly better, though the shadows under her eyes suggested she had not slept as well as he had hoped. They walked together to the small restaurant at the end of the street, and over coffee and eggs, they began to figure out what came next. "What did you do before?" Isaac asked. "Before everything happened." "I helped my husband with his work," Florence said. "He was a carpenter, a very good one. I learned a lot from him, actually. I can do basic repairs, build simple furniture. I also sew. I made most of my own clothes." She looked down at her worn dress self-consciously. "This was one of my nicer ones." "Those are useful skills," Isaac said thoughtfully. "This town is small, but it is growing. There are new people coming through all the time because of the mining operations to the north. People need furniture, clothes, repairs. Maybe you could start a small business." Florence shook her head. "I would need tools, materials, a place to work. All of that requires money I do not have." "What if we could get the tools?" Isaac asked. "What happened to your husband's equipment when the bank took your property?" Florence's expression darkened. "They sold most of it at auction. Some man from California bought everything for half of what it was worth." Isaac drummed his fingers on the table. "Who bought it? Is he still in town?" "I do not know his name. Someone said he was staying at the hotel while he arranged for transport." "Let's find out," Isaac said, standing up and dropping money on the table for their meal. They spent the next hour asking around town, and eventually learned that the man who had bought the tools was a merchant named Harold Pemberton. He was indeed staying at the hotel, planning to leave for California in 2 days with his purchases. Isaac found him in the hotel lobby, a portly man with mutton chops and an expensive suit that looked out of place in the dusty Nevada town. "Mr. Pemberton," Isaac said, approaching with his hat in his hands and a friendly smile on his face. "I understand you recently acquired some carpenter's tools at auction." Pemberton looked him up and down with the practiced eye of a man used to sizing up potential business. "I did. Why do you ask?" "My associate here is a skilled carpenter," Isaac said, gesturing to Florence, who stood slightly behind him. "Those tools belong to her late husband. She is interested in buying them back." Pemberton's eyes flicked to Florence and his expression became calculating. "I paid good money for those tools. If she wanted them, she should have bid at the auction." "She had no money to bid with," Isaac said evenly. "The bank had taken everything, but she is willing to offer you a fair price now." "I do not think so," Pemberton said. "Those tools are worth at least $200 in California, maybe more." Florence made a small sound of distress. Isaac kept his expression neutral, but his jaw tightened slightly. $200 is robbery and you know it," Isaac said. "You paid maybe 80 at the auction." "That is business," Pemberton replied with a shrug. "If you cannot afford my price, then I suggest you look elsewhere." Isaac stared at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the hotel. Florence followed, confused and deflated. "I am sorry," she said when they were back on the street. "I knew it was a lost cause." "It is not over yet," Isaac said grimly. He was quiet for a moment, thinking, then he turned to her. "How much do you think those tools are actually worth, honestly?" "In good condition, maybe $120, Florence said. "My husband took very good care of them." Isaac nodded slowly. "I have about $90 left from my winnings. It is not enough." "I cannot let you spend your money on this," Florence protested. "You have already done too much. You trust me?" Isaac asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. "I barely know you. That is not what I asked." Florence looked into his eyes and found herself nodding before she fully realized what she was doing. Yes, I think I do. Then trust me on this. I have an idea, but I need you to not ask questions until after it is done. That evening, Isaac found himself back in the hotel, but this time he went to the saloon attached to it. He had learned that Pemberton enjoyed gambling and often spent his evenings playing cards. Isaac ordered a whiskey and waited, watching the tables. When Pemberton finally arrived, Isaac made sure to position himself at the same poker table. The game started small, but Isaac played conservatively, winning just enough to stay interesting but not enough to intimidate anyone. He watched Pemberton carefully, noting the man's tells, the way his left eye twitched slightly when he was bluffing, the way he tugged at his collar when he had a good hand. 2 hours later, Isaac had tripled his money. Pemberton had lost about $60 and was looking frustrated. Isaac decided it was time to make his move. "Tell you what," Isaac said casually as he gathered his winnings. "I will play you one more hand, just you and me, high stakes." Pemberton's eyes narrowed. "How high?" "Everything I have won tonight against those carpenter's tools you bought." The saloon went quiet. Everyone had heard about the tools and knew the story behind them. Pemberton studied Isaac, trying to determine if this was a trick. "You have maybe $250 there," Pemberton said slowly. "Those tools are not worth that much." "Then you should have no problem accepting the bet," Isaac said calmly, "unless you are afraid you might lose." The challenge hit its mark. Pemberton's face flushed. "Deal the cards." The crowd pressed in closer as the dealer shuffled. Isaac felt his heart pounding but kept his face carefully blank. This was a huge risk, gambling away everything he had, but something deep inside told him it was the right thing to do. The hand was dealt. Isaac looked at his cards. A pair of tens. Not great, but not terrible. He watched Pemberton's face as the man examined his own cards. There was the collar tug. Pemberton had something good. The betting started. Isaac matched every raise Pemberton made, his pile of money slowly moving to the center of the table. Finally, Pemberton called. "3 jacks," Pemberton said, laying down his cards with a triumphant grin. Isaac felt his stomach drop. He had lost everything. But he kept his face neutral as he started to lay down his cards. Just as he was about to reveal the losing hand, a voice spoke up from behind him. "That is curious," the dealer said, his eyes sharp. "Mr. Pemberton, would you mind showing me that deck?" Pemberton's face went pale. "What are you suggesting?" "I am not suggesting anything. I am asking to see the deck." The dealer was a professional, hired by the hotel specifically because he was known to be honest. His word carried weight. Reluctantly, Pemberton handed over the deck. The dealer fanned through it quickly, then held up 2 cards. Both were jacks of diamonds. "There are 2 of the same card in this deck," the dealer announced loudly. "This game is void. Mr. Pemberton, I am going to have to ask you to leave. The hotel does not tolerate cheaters." The crowd erupted in angry muttering. Pemberton stood up quickly, his face red. "This is absurd." "I did not touch that deck." "Maybe you did, maybe you did not," the dealer said, "but those are the rules. The game is void and you are no longer welcome at these tables." Pemberton grabbed what was left of his money and stormed out. Isaac sat back in his chair, his heart still racing. He had gotten incredibly lucky. The dealer caught his eye and gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Isaac nodded back. He suspected the dealer had seen Pemberton cheat before and had been waiting for the right moment to catch him. Isaac gathered his money and walked out into the cool night air. He found Florence waiting outside the boarding house, pacing nervously. When she saw him, she rushed over. "What happened?" "I heard there was some kind of commotion at the saloon." "Pemberton is a cheat," Isaac said. "He got caught, but that means we have a problem. He still has those tools and now he is angry. He will probably leave town first thing tomorrow morning with them. Florence's face fell. Then we are back where we started. Not exactly, Isaac said. He had been thinking during the walk back. Those tools are yours by right, even if the law does not see it that way. What time does Pemberton usually come down for breakfast? I do not know. Why? Because sometimes the right thing and the legal thing are not the same thing, Isaac said quietly. And sometimes a man has to choose which one matters more. Florence stared at him. You cannot be suggesting what I think you are suggesting. I am not suggesting anything, Isaac said. I am just saying that if someone happened to retrieve those tools before Pemberton could leave town, the law might have a hard time proving who they really belong to. And Pemberton is not exactly in a position to make a fuss, given that he just got caught cheating. That is stealing, Florence said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it stealing to take back what was yours in the first place? Isaac asked. Your husband earned those tools with honest work. The bank had no right to take them, and Pemberton had no right to profit from your misery. Florence was quiet for a long moment. If you did this and if you got caught, you could hang. I could, Isaac agreed, but I am pretty good at not getting caught. Why would you risk that for me? Florence asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Isaac looked at her in the moonlight. Because in the 2 days I have known you, I have seen more strength and courage in you than I have seen in most people I have known my whole life. Because you deserve better than what life has given you. And because somewhere along the way, helping you stopped being about doing the right thing and started being about doing right by you specifically. Florence felt something shift in her chest, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the desert heat. I am coming with you, she said firmly. Absolutely not. If something goes wrong, I will not have you caught up in it. Those are my husband's tools. If anyone is going to take them back, it should be me. Besides, you do not even know what they look like or which room Pemberton has them in. Isaac opened his mouth to argue but then closed it again. She was right, and they both knew it. All right, he said finally. But you do exactly what I say when I say it. Agreed, agreed. They spent the next hour planning. Florence had learned from Mrs. Patterson which room Pemberton was staying in. Isaac watched the hotel until he saw the lights in Pemberton's room go out. They waited another hour to be sure he was asleep, and then they made their move. Isaac had picked locks before. It was not a skill he was proud of, but it was one he had learned during some harder times. The hotel's back door was easy, and they slipped inside quietly. The stairs creaked slightly as they climbed to the second floor, and Isaac froze each time, listening for any sound of movement. But the hotel remained quiet. Pemberton's door was locked, but it was a simple mechanism. Isaac had it open in less than a minute. They slipped inside, and Florence immediately spotted her husband's tool chest in the corner. It was a beautiful piece of work, made of oak with brass fittings, and seeing it brought tears to her eyes. They were halfway to the door with the chest between them when Pemberton suddenly sat up in bed. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. Isaac did not hesitate. He dropped his end of the chest and crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hand covering Pemberton's mouth before the man could shout again. "Listen to me very carefully," Isaac said in a low, dangerous voice. "You cheated at cards tonight. Everyone in this town knows it. If you make a fuss about these tools, I will make sure everyone also knows that you bought stolen property. The bank had no legal right to seize these tools because they were not part of the original debt. They belonged to Mrs. Nakamura personally, inherited from her father. That is the truth, and I have the papers to prove it." This was a complete bluff. There were no papers. But Pemberton did not know that, and in the darkness, with Isaac's hand over his mouth and fear running through him, he was in no position to question it. I am going to remove my hand, Isaac continued. If you shout, if you make any noise at all, things are going to get very difficult for you. Do you understand? Pemberton nodded frantically. Isaac removed his hand and stepped back. Florence had already picked up the chest again and was waiting by the door. You have no proof those tools are yours, Pemberton hissed. I will go to the sheriff. Go ahead, Isaac said calmly. But remember, you are the one who got caught cheating tonight. Who do you think the sheriff is going to believe? A local widow or a cheating outsider who is trying to profit off her misery? Pemberton clearly had not thought of it that way. His face twisted with impotent rage, but he said nothing more. Isaac backed toward the door, keeping his eyes on Pemberton the whole time. If you are smart, you will leave town tomorrow as planned and forget this ever happened, Isaac said. If you are not smart, well, I hear the sheriff takes a very dim view of people who cheat at cards. Some might even say it is a hanging offense in certain circumstances. This was also a bluff, but again, Pemberton did not know that. Isaac slipped out the door and closed it behind him. He and Florence hurried down the stairs and out the back door, not stopping until they were safely back at the boarding house. They set the tool chest down in the alley beside the building, both of them breathing hard. Florence looked at Isaac, her eyes wide. I cannot believe we just did that, she said. Neither can I, Isaac admitted. That was incredibly stupid and reckless. And absolutely necessary, Florence added. She surprised them both by laughing, a sound of pure relief and exhilaration. Thank you so much. We are not safe yet, Isaac warned. Pemberton might still go to the sheriff. We need to get those tools somewhere secure and come up with a better story than the one I just made up on the spot. They spent the rest of the night hiding the tool chest in an abandoned shed at the edge of town. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they finally allowed themselves to relax slightly. What now? Florence asked. Now we wait and see if Pemberton makes good on leaving town, Isaac said. If he does, then the tools are yours again and you can start rebuilding. And if he does not, Isaac's expression hardened. Then we deal with that when it happens. But Pemberton did leave town that morning just as planned. Whether it was fear of exposure or simply a desire to cut his losses, Isaac never knew. What mattered was that by noon, the merchant was gone, and the tools were safely in Florence's possession. Over the next few days, Isaac helped Florence set up a small workshop in the shed where they had hidden the tools. It was not much, just a dirt floor and 4 walls, but it was a start. Florence began taking small jobs, fixing broken furniture and doing basic carpentry work. Word spread quickly that she was skilled and reliable, and soon she had more work than she could handle alone. Isaac found himself spending more and more time at the workshop, helping with the heavier tasks and learning the trade from Florence. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and sharing meals in the evening. Isaac continued to stay in his room at the boarding house across the street, respecting the rules and Florence's reputation. But there was no denying that something was growing between them. It was Florence who first acknowledged it, about 3 weeks after they had met. They were sitting outside the workshop, watching the sun set over the desert when she turned to him. Isaac, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why have you stayed? You said you were just passing through, but you have been here almost a month now. You could have left any time. Isaac was quiet for a moment. I suppose I could have, he said finally, but I did not want to. Why not? He looked at her, really looked at her. In the fading light, her face was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness, and everything to do with character and strength. Her hands were calloused from work, her hair was often coming loose from its pins, and there was a small smudge of sawdust on her cheek. She was the most incredible person he had ever met. Because somewhere along the way I stopped drifting and started living, he said. And I do not want to go back to the way things were before. Florence's breath caught. Isaac, I need to tell you something. I have been feeling something for you. I tried to ignore it because it has only been a few months since my husband died, and I thought it was too soon. But the truth is, what I feel for you is different from anything I have ever felt before. My marriage was comfortable, but it was arranged by our families. I respected my husband and cared for him, but I did not love him, not the way I think I could love you. Isaac reached out and took her hand. Florence, I have never stayed in one place long enough to let myself care about anyone. But you changed that. You changed everything. I know we have not known each other long, and I know the timing is complicated, but I need you to know that I am falling in love with you. I think I have been since the moment I saw you in that chapel. Tears spilled down Florence's cheeks, but she was smiling. I am falling in love with you too. Isaac stood up and pulled her gently to her feet. Then let me do this properly, he said. He took both of her hands in his. Florence Nakamura, I know I am not much. I do not have a home or a fortune or anything impressive to offer. But I have two good hands, a strong back, and a heart that is yours if you want it. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing I get to spend another day with you. I want to help you turn this little workshop into something bigger and better. I want everything with you. Yes, Florence whispered. Yes to all of it. Isaac pulled her close and kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, then deeper, full of all the emotion they had been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. We should probably do this properly, Isaac said. Let me court you the right way. Let me show the whole town that my intentions are honorable, Florence laughed. I think after we stole back my tools together, we are a bit beyond traditional courting. Maybe so, Isaac agreed, but you deserve to be courted anyway. And so he did court her, despite their unconventional beginning. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, walked with her through town in the evening, and sat with her in the chapel on Sundays. Mrs. Patterson watched it all with a skeptical eye at first, but eventually softened when she saw how gentle Isaac was with Florence and how happy Florence seemed. The workshop continued to grow. Florence's reputation spread beyond Sloane, and people came from neighboring towns to commission pieces. Isaac proved to have a natural talent for the work, and together they created beautiful furniture that was both functional and artistic. They saved every penny they could, planning for a future together. 6 months after they met, Isaac asked Florence to marry him properly, with a ring he had commissioned from a silversmith in Carson City. It was a simple band with a small turquoise stone, but to Florence, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. They were married in the same chapel where they had first met, with half the town in attendance. Mrs. Patterson cried during the ceremony, though she tried to hide it. The owner of the general store gave them a set of dishes as a wedding gift. Even the sheriff, who had eventually heard rumors about the tool chest incident but had chosen to look the other way, attended and wished them well. Isaac and Florence bought a small piece of land on the edge of town and built a house together, using the skills they had both learned. It was not fancy, but it was theirs, and every nail and board represented their partnership and love for each other. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. There were lean months when work was scarce and they had to tighten their belts. There were disagreements about how to run the business and manage their finances. But through it all, they never forgot what had brought them together in the first place. They had both been lost and broken, and they had found each other and built something new and beautiful from the pieces. Florence discovered she was pregnant in the spring of 1884, almost 2 years after they had first met. Isaac was overjoyed and immediately became overprotective, insisting that she rest more and take on fewer projects. Florence found this both touching and exasperating, and they compromised on her continuing to work but avoiding the heavier tasks. Their first child, a son they named James, was born in December of that year. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes, and Isaac fell in love with him instantly. Watching Isaac with their son, seeing the tenderness and devotion in his face, Florence fell in love with him all over again. Life in Sloan continued to evolve. The town grew as more people came to work in the mines or seek their fortunes in the expanding West. Isaac and Florence's business grew with it. They hired 2 young men as apprentices, teaching them the carpentry trade just as Florence's husband had taught her. The workshop expanded, and they built a larger facility with proper equipment. Florence never forgot her first husband, and Isaac never expected her to. They kept a photograph of him in their home, and Florence would sometimes tell their children stories about him. There was no jealousy or resentment in any of it. The past was the past, and it had shaped who they were, but it did not define their future. When James was 3, Florence gave birth to their second child, a daughter named Catherine. She was a fierce little thing from the moment she was born, with a cry that could wake the entire household. Isaac doted on her shamelessly, and Florence would often find him holding her for hours, just watching her sleep. As the years passed, Isaac and Florence became pillars of the Sloan community. They helped establish a proper school, contributed to building a new church when the old chapel became too small, and were always ready to help neighbors in need. Isaac never forgot the kindness shown to him and his sister when they were children, and he made it his mission to pay that kindness forward whenever possible. There were still hard times. A drought in 1888 hit the region hard, and several businesses in town failed. Isaac and Florence weathered it by diversifying their work, taking on repairs and small jobs that they might have turned down in better times. They also extended credit to customers who were struggling, trusting that people would pay when they could. Most did, and those who could not often paid in other ways, with labor or goods or simply by spreading word of Florence and Isaac's generosity. One evening in 1889, 7 years after they had first met, Isaac and Florence sat on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Catherine was chasing James around with a stick, both of them shrieking with laughter. The workshop was visible in the distance, solid and successful. The desert stretched out beyond it, beautiful and harsh in the fading light. "You ever think about that day in the chapel?" Florence asked quietly. "All the time," Isaac admitted. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just ridden past, if I had not stopped." "I would probably still be lost," Florence said. "Or worse, you saved my life that day." "We saved each other," Isaac corrected gently. "You gave me a reason to stop running. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. I was just as lost as you were, I just did not know it yet." Florence leaned her head against his shoulder. "I loved my first husband in my own way. He was a good man and I mourned him. But what I have with you is different. It is like the difference between a candle and a bonfire. Both give light, but one can warm your whole life." Isaac kissed the top of her head. "I never thought I would have this. I never thought I deserved it." "You deserve everything good in the world," Florence said firmly. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." As if sensing a tender moment, James ran up to the porch. "Papa, can you teach me to use the saw tomorrow? The small one, not the big one." "I promise I will be careful." Isaac looked at his son, seeing himself at that age hungry to learn and prove himself. "I think that can be arranged, but your mother has to approve it first." James turned to Florence with pleading eyes. She pretended to consider it seriously, then nodded. All right. But you do exactly what your father tells you, understand? I promise, James shouted, then ran off to share the news with Catherine. He is going to be a fine carpenter one day, Isaac said. Just like his father, Florence agreed. The years continued to pass in a blur of work and family, and the simple joys of a life well lived. In 1892, Florence gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas. The house had to be expanded to accommodate the growing family, and Isaac took great pleasure in the work, making sure every detail was perfect. The business continued to thrive. They opened a second workshop in a neighboring town, with one of their former apprentices running it. The quality of their work became known throughout the region, and they began receiving commissions from wealthy families in San Francisco and Los Angeles. But despite their success, Isaac and Florence never forgot their roots. They continued to live modestly, saving money and investing in the community. They helped establish a library in Sloan and donated books. They contributed to a fund that helped widows and orphans, remembering all too well how close Florence had come to complete destitution. In 1895, Mrs. Patterson passed away. She left her boarding house to Florence in her will, along with a note that read, "You proved me wrong about love, my dear. I am glad I lived long enough to see it." Florence cried for days, touched by the gesture and saddened by the loss of a woman who had become like a mother to her. They decided to keep the boarding house running, hiring a manager to oversee the day-to-day operations. The income from it provided financial security for their family and allowed them to be even more generous in their charitable efforts. As their children grew older, Isaac and Florence began to think about the future in different terms. James showed a clear talent for carpentry and was already working alongside his father in the workshop at age 14. Catherine surprised everyone by showing an interest in business and numbers, helping her mother keep the books and manage the finances. Thomas, the youngest, was still finding his way, but he had a gentle spirit and a way with animals that suggested he might be suited for ranch work. One day in 1897, Florence was sorting through some old papers when she came across the deed to the property that had been seized by the bank 15 years earlier. She had kept it as a reminder of where she had come from. On impulse, she showed it to Isaac. "I wonder what happened to the land," she said. "I heard the bank eventually sold it, but I never knew to who." Isaac studied the deed thoughtfully. "We could find out. Would you want to know?" Florence considered it. "I think I would, not because I want it back necessarily. I just wonder sometimes what became of it. My first husband and I worked so hard on that land. It would be nice to know it is being put to good use." They made some inquiries and discovered that the land had been bought by a rancher who had struggled to make it profitable. The current owner was looking to sell. Without telling Florence, Isaac went to look at the property. It was run down and neglected. The house they had built was barely standing, and the barn had collapsed entirely. But the land itself was still good, and Isaac could see its potential. He bought it quietly, using money they had saved over the years. Then he gathered James and some of their workers and spent 3 months rebuilding everything. They tore down the old structures and built new ones, better and stronger than before. They repaired the fences, cleared the fields, and planted an orchard. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Isaac blindfolded Florence and drove her out to the property. When he removed the blindfold, she gasped. "How did you?" She started, then stopped, too overwhelmed to finish the sentence. "I wanted you to have it back," Isaac said. "Not because you need it, but because you should have it. This land represents everything you and your first husband worked for. It should not have been taken from you, so I am giving it back." Florence walked slowly across the property, taking in all the changes. The house was new but built in a similar style to the original. The barn was sturdy and well constructed. The orchard was young but already showing promise. She stopped at a spot near the back of the property and knelt down, touching the earth with her hands. "He is buried near here," she said softly. "My first husband. The bank would not pay for a proper marker, so I had to bury him myself with just a wooden cross. I always felt terrible about that." "Then let us fix it," Isaac said. He had known about the grave and had already commissioned a proper headstone. It arrived 2 weeks later, a simple but dignified marker with her first husband's name and dates. They held a small ceremony to install it, with their children in attendance, and Florence was finally able to properly say goodbye. After that, the property became a gathering place for their family. They did not live there, choosing to stay in the home they had built together in Sloan, but they visited often. James eventually expressed interest in working the land, and when he came of age, Isaac and Florence gave him the property as a wedding gift when he married a local girl named Sarah. Catherine grew into a formidable businesswoman. At 19, she proposed expanding their carpentry business into manufacturing, producing pre-made furniture pieces that could be shipped all over the West. Isaac was skeptical at first, but Florence encouraged him to listen to their daughter's ideas. Catherine's instincts proved correct, and the manufacturing venture was hugely successful. Thomas, true to his early interests, ended up working on a ranch north of Sloan. He was happy there, and Isaac and Florence were proud of him for finding his own path rather than simply following in the family business. The turn of the century brought changes to Sloan and to the American West in general. The wild frontier was becoming more civilized, with better roads, telegraph lines, and eventually even telephone service. The rough edges were smoothing out, and while there was something lost in that transformation, there was also much gained. Isaac was 52 in 1900, and Florence was 45. They had been married for 18 years and had built a life together that exceeded anything either of them had imagined possible. Their business employed over 20 people and had branches in 3 towns. Their children were grown and thriving. They had respect in the community and financial security, but more than any of that, they had each other. The passion of their early love had matured into something deeper and more enduring. They knew each other's rhythms and habits, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room, and still found joy in the simple act of being together. One evening, they took a walk through Sloan, something they often did together. The town had grown considerably since that hot day in 1882 when Isaac had first ridden in. There were streetlights now, and a proper hotel had replaced the old boarding house. The chapel where they had met had been expanded into a full church, and the town even had a small opera house. They stopped in front of the church and looked at it together. "Do you remember?" Florence asked. "Every second of it," Isaac replied. "I heard you crying from outside. I almost did not go in. I almost convinced myself it was not my business. What made you change your mind?" Isaac thought about it. "I do not know if I can explain it. It was like something pulled me in, like I was supposed to be there at that exact moment. Fate," Florence said, "or providence, or just incredible luck. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day." They walked home hand in hand, comfortable in the silence that comes from knowing someone deeply. The desert night was cool and clear, stars blazing overhead in the vast sky. That night, lying in bed, Florence turned to Isaac. "I have been thinking about something." "What is it?" "We have spent so much time building and working and planning for the future. I'm not saying we should stop any of that, but I think we should also make time to just enjoy what we have, To travel a little, see new things, make new memories. Isaac smiled in the darkness. Where would you want to go? Everywhere, Florence said with a laugh. But we could start small. Maybe San Francisco. I have never seen the ocean. Then we will go, Isaac said. We will take a month, maybe two. Catherine can manage the business. She has been itching for more responsibility anyway. They made the trip 3 months later, taking the train to San Francisco. It was Florence's first time on a train, and she spent the entire journey with her face pressed to the window, marveling at the scenery rushing past. Isaac watched her with the same fascination he had felt when they first met, still finding new things to love about her after all these years. San Francisco was a revelation. The city was enormous and bustling, full of people from all over the world. They visited museums and restaurants, walked along the waterfront, and took a ferry across the bay. Florence stood at the edge of the water, feeling the cool ocean breeze on her face, and cried at the beauty of it. I wish I could have shown this to my first husband, she said quietly. He would have loved it. Isaac put his arm around her. Tell me about him, tell me what he was like. Florence was surprised by the request. Are you sure? Of course. He was important to you, that makes him important to me. And so Florence talked about her first husband, sharing memories she had kept locked away for years. She told Isaac about his patience, his skill as a carpenter, the way he had taught her the trade with gentle encouragement. She talked about the dreams they had shared, and the life they had been building before fever had stolen it all away. Isaac listened without jealousy or discomfort. He understood that love was not a finite resource, that Florence's ability to honor her first husband's memory did not diminish what she felt for him. If anything, it made him love her more, seeing the depth of her capacity for love and loyalty. They returned to Sloane refreshed and inspired. Isaac began teaching Catherine more about the business, preparing her to eventually take over. Florence started a program to teach carpentry to young women, something almost unheard of at the time but which she felt passionately about. If she could learn the trade, she reasoned, why could not other women? The program was controversial at first, but Florence's reputation and determination won out. Within 2 years, she had trained a dozen young women, several of whom went on to start their own businesses or work alongside their families. It became one of her proudest accomplishments. In 1905, James and his wife Sarah welcomed their first child, making Isaac and Florence grandparents for the first time. Isaac held his grandson, also named Isaac, and felt a sense of continuity that moved him deeply. This child would grow up in a world very different from the one Isaac had known, but he would carry the family name and legacy forward. Catherine married a year later, to a young attorney from Carson City. Florence helped plan the wedding, which was the social event of the season in Sloane. Thomas remained unmarried but seemed content with his life on the ranch, and his parents did not push him. As they entered their 60s, Isaac and Florence began to slow down. They handed over day-to-day operations of the business to Catherine and her husband, though they remained active in an advisory capacity. They spent more time at home, working in the garden Isaac had planted, reading together in the evenings, and enjoying visits from their children and grandchildren. One afternoon in 1910, almost 30 years after they had first met, Florence found Isaac standing in front of the church where they had married. He did not see her approach, lost in his thoughts. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Isaac turned and smiled. "I was thinking about that day I heard you crying in the old chapel. I was thinking about how different my life would have been if I had just kept riding. I would have drifted from town to town, never putting down roots, never letting myself care about anyone or anything. I would have ended up alone and bitter, probably dying young in some saloon fight or from too much whiskey. Instead, Florence prompted, instead I found you, and you gave me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a purpose. You made me believe I was worth something more than just existing from one day to the next. Florence took his hand. You did the same for me. I was ready to give up that day. If you had not come into the chapel, I do not know what I would have done. You showed me that even when everything is lost, there can still be hope. There can still be love. I told you that day that you had me, Isaac said, and I have kept that promise every day since. And I have kept mine to pay you back, Florence replied. Not in money, but in love and partnership and loyalty. I think we have both honored our promises. They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other in the depths of despair and built a life of joy and meaning together. The years continued their steady march forward. Isaac and Florence watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated more weddings, welcomed more great-grandchildren. The business they had built continued to thrive under Catherine's management, and the family name became synonymous with quality craftsmanship throughout Nevada. Isaac's health began to decline in 1918. He was 70 years old and had lived a hard life before meeting Florence. His body bore the marks of years of physical labor and the lingering effects of old injuries. But his spirit remained strong, and Florence cared for him with the same devotion he had shown her decades earlier. One evening, sitting on their porch and watching the sun set over the desert, Isaac turned to Florence. I have had a good life, better than I ever imagined possible. Do not talk like that, Florence said, though she knew what he was really saying. You have many years left. Isaac smiled gently. Maybe. But if I do not, I want you to know that I have no regrets. Every choice I made, every path I took led me to you. And loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Tears streamed down Florence's face. I cannot imagine life without you. You are stronger than you think, Isaac said. You survived losing everything once. You built yourself back up. If the time comes, you will do it again. But you will not be alone. You have our children, our grandchildren, this whole community. You have everything we built together. Isaac lived for another 3 years, passing away peacefully in his sleep in 1921 at the age of 73. The funeral was one of the largest Sloan had ever seen, with people traveling from all over the region to pay their respects. He was buried in the town cemetery with a headstone that read simply, Isaac Irvington, beloved husband, father, and friend. Florence grieved deeply but carried on, just as Isaac had known she would. She continued to live in their home, surrounded by the life they had built together. She spent time with her family, continued her work teaching carpentry to young women, and remained active in the community. 5 years after Isaac's death, Florence was diagnosed with pneumonia. At 70, her body did not have the strength to fight it off. As she lay in bed, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, she felt a sense of peace. She had lived a full life, had known deep loss and profound love, had built something lasting and meaningful. Catherine leaned close. Is there anything you need, Mother? Florence smiled weakly. I need you to remember the story of how your father and I met. I need you to tell it to your children and their children. I need you to remember that even in our darkest moments, hope can find us. Love can find us. We will remember, Catherine promised, tears streaming down her face. Florence closed her eyes. In her mind, she was back in that little chapel in 1882, kneeling in prayer, convinced she had nothing left. And then a voice, gentle and unexpected. You have me. She had found everything she needed in those 3 words. They had sustained her through decades of joy and sorrow, through building and growing and living a life beyond anything she could have imagined. Florence Nakamura Irvington passed away peacefully on a warm spring evening in 1926, surrounded by love. She was buried next to Isaac, their headstones side by side, forever together as they had been in life. The family business continued for generations, always carried forward by at least one descendant who had inherited the talent and passion for craftsmanship. The house in Sloan became a family landmark, preserved and maintained by each new generation. The property that had been reclaimed became a working ranch that thrived under the care of James's descendants. But perhaps the greatest legacy was the story itself. Catherine kept her promise and told her children about the day a drifting cowboy had walked into a chapel and found a woman who had lost everything. About how he had offered himself when she had nothing. About how they had built a love so strong it carried them through decades of life's challenges and joys. The story was passed down through the generations, told and retold, becoming part of the family mythology. It was a reminder that hope could be found in the darkest moments, that love could transform everything, and that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected encounters. In the chapel where Isaac and Florence had first met, which had been expanded and renovated many times over the years but still stood in the heart of Sloan, there was a small plaque installed by their grandchildren. It read, "In memory of Isaac and Florence Irvington, who found each other here in 1882. May their love inspire all who enter to never give up hope." And so their story lived on, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love. Two people who had been lost had found each other, and together they had created something beautiful that would echo through time, touching lives they would never know, inspiring hope in hearts that needed it most. The Wild West that Isaac had known, with its rough edges and lawless frontier spirit, had long since faded into history. But the values he and Florence had embodied, courage, kindness, loyalty, and love, remained timeless. Their story was proof that even in the harshest environments, even in the most desperate circumstances, the human capacity for love and redemption could flourish and create something extraordinary. And in the end, that was all that truly mattered. Not the money they had made or the business they had built, but the love they had shared and the family they had created. It was a legacy measured not in material wealth, but in the lives they had touched and the hope they had given to others who, like Florence on that desperate day in 1882, believed they had nothing left, only to discover they had everything they needed in the simple gift of love offered freely and without condition.